Hi, my name is Dan Nelson. I'm an artist. I'm glad to have you join me for another free art lesson. It's time to start dealing with details. Boy, the devil's in the details. That's so negative, isn't it? The joy is in the details. Today I'm going to focus on how to draw a human eye. And let me restate just a couple things that are obvious. Number one is I'm showing you one way to draw the human anatomy. There are so many ways, and there's so many people. In fact, to be absolutely honest, there's so many people that are so much better at it than I am. I'm what I would call an all-rounder. I do all kinds of artwork. I do landscape, I do architectural renderings, I do cartoons, I do airbrush. So I haven't spent my whole life just doing figures and portraits and anatomy. Maybe for that reason it's still kind of fun to me, and I hope you picked that up. I'm not so good that it's boring. In fact, I'm so bad that sometimes it's still scary. But I have a good time, and I hope that I can help you out a little bit. And maybe when you graduate from me, you can go to somebody that's far better than I am. But I want to focus on, we've been talking about heads and faces a little bit. I want to focus on the human eye. Boy, this is where it gets fun. Let's go back to the human skeleton, or as I said a few lessons ago, a skeleton. Because at this point it really becomes helpful for you to be able to see underneath the flesh, to see what's going on. Now, I have not practiced a skull lately, so you're going to have to accept that this is a close enough for jazz kind of rendering of a human skull. Close enough for Halloween, I guess, isn't it? The most important feature I'm focusing on here, of course, is the eye socket. The eye socket is essentially round. I'm sure that if we got into more detail, we'd find, well, that it's a little bit tapered off here, and so on and so on and so forth. But for all practical purposes, I'm going to call the eye socket is round. And it's important to know that because the top of the eye socket right here, this ridge right along here, is conveniently where our eyebrow grows. That is a bony protrusion, and that is an essentially immovable part of the human face, is that arch. Now, everything that happens underneath that arch is quite movable. That's why eyes get complex. If I can turn this, now just ignore this drawing a little bit because I'm going to draw an eyeball from the side, or an eye socket, and I'm going to take this face and turn it slightly to our right, to his left, and zoom in a little bit, and I want you to see some of the things that are happening. I'm going to draw an eye socket this way. Here is, you see that? There's that eyebrow arch. That's a bony protrusion that does not move. Likewise, down here is the bridge of the nose. By the way, I did happen to just look, this is called the glabella. If you really want to know, every single little tiny piece of the human face has a name, and I don't remember most of them. So I thought it was appropriate to show off at this one point and tell you that I do know the name of that one because I just read it. It's called the glabella. Go, amaze your friends. Hey, buddy, you got a nice glabella. It's the name of the bony part of the forehead that comes down between the two eyes. Be that as it may, you can skip that nonsense if you want. Then there's the bridge of the nose, which of course the nose has bone in it down to a point, then it has cartilage down to the rest of the nose. But I want to come back up here to the eye. Do you see this is a person's, their left eye turned slightly. To get just the position of that, I would like you to remove the eyeball completely. Remove the eye. There's no eyeball in this socket. This is simply socket with no eye, okay? To get things positioned right. I want you to envision this as roughly a rectangular shape. So if I turn it around sideways, frontwards, I'm sorry, again, it's a rectangle shape like this, demarcated by the glabella, the arch of the eyebrow, and then the outside of the socket, which I'm sure has a name that I don't remember, but outside of the socket will do, and cheekbone is down here somewhere. If we take this, I want you to imagine that this is a piece of elastic rubber, like a popped balloon. Are you with me? This is a piece of rubber stretched over this framework. Okay? Now the next thing I'm going to do to imitate a human eye is I'm going to take, my thumb's a little bit too small, but pretend I have a little bit bigger thumb, and I'm simply going to push in on that rubber. Then instead of a flat rectangle, can you visualize? You have to be able to imagine now the shape that we have. I'm trying to indicate it here very roughly. It's a flat plane that is roughly rectangular. I've turned it sideways now, and I've pushed in on it. So it goes in here, goes in here, goes in here, goes in here. Are you with me? Now, if you can kind of scoop that out, it's like the inside of a spoon-shaped shape right there. That is a socket, an eye socket with no eyeball. But if you can get that part right, then you're on the right track to start positioning the eyeball inside the socket. Are you with me? So that's the next thing we're going to do. I want you to imagine then that that's rubber, and I've pushed in on it just a little bit, not too far. Well, it depends how sunken the person's eyes are, because some are receded quite a bit, some are very shallow. But we've pushed in on it. Let's just imagine that this is magic rubber, and it is now frozen in place. Well, mostly frozen. It doesn't bounce back, so it's staying there. Now I'm going to take a marble, a large marble. You understand, of course, I'm sure, that the human eye is virtually a perfect sphere, right? You know that, don't you? So it is a sphere. Most of the sphere is tucked inside the head, inside the eye socket, but some of it pushes out. So we've got this concave elastic shape here that's the eye socket. Now I'm going to come around behind it, and I'm going to push forward, again, moving that elastic rubber plane. So now there is the shape of a sphere pushing back out toward us in the middle of this elastic plane. Does that make sense? If I put an iris on it, it would be something like that. Are you with me? But I'm trying not to indicate any details now. I just want you to visualize that that's a sphere now pushing back out. You with me? So we started out by taking a rectangle, it's flat, we pushed it in, and then we pushed the sphere back through it. That will give you have to be able to visualize that in your mind in order to get the position of a human eye correct. It doesn't do any good to say this is a human eye, because that's only a human eye that's wide open, looking straight at you. And most of your best drawings and portraits, the people are not going to be looking straight at you. They're going to be turned to the side. And as soon as they start turning, it's all messed up, right? So you have to be able to visualize this. Are you with me? If I were to go ahead and let's just like draw the other one here. So here's the other eye. This is a person's left eye. Now I'm drawing their right eye. Turn to the side slightly. Rigid bone, more or less rigid bone down here, and rigid bone here, right? And we put this plane of rubber across it, and then we push it in. Boom, there's the eye socket with an eye. Then we take a sphere, has to be the right size, and I'm not getting into that degree of detail here, and we push the sphere back out. Let me grab an eraser. Maybe I can get some three-dimensionality going on here. This is what I want you to imagine. I don't want you to be seeing eyelashes, eyelids, and that kind of thing. I simply want you to be envisioning this soft, three-dimensional shape. Does that make sense? I'm drawing it very quickly, so it's not very accurate, but do you see there? This is if light is coming from this angle. That's what I want you to be able to do. Forget the eyelashes, forget the eyelids, all that kind of stuff. If you cannot visualize this in your mind first, then everything else is going to be all messed up, okay? So it's this concave plane. It goes inside the socket, and in the middle of that concavity, I think that's a real word. In the middle of that concavity is a convex shape coming toward the viewer. Okay, let me go to a new page and start talking about eyelashes, eyelids, and so forth. Woohoo! The eyes have it. Okay. Let me go back, for simplicity, back to the front view of the eye, so it's a very simple view. This is a person's left eye. So here's the eyebrow arch, the glabella, the part of the nose here, cheekbone outside. Okay, good enough. Concave in, convex out in the middle. So the eyeball shape is something like that. Okay, that's the eyeball. The whole thing. Most of the eyeball, of course, is hidden underneath this soft, fleshy tissue. In fact, let me make a correction. It needs to be a little bit bigger than that. Thank you. The part of the eyeball that we see is only a portion of this. And the part that we focus on most is, of course, the windows to the soul, the iris and the pupil. Now we'll come back and talk about what that iris and what that pupil is in a minute, but let's just start there for now. A couple of the most important lines of the eye, of course, are the orientation, the placement of the eyelids. And my pupil's a little small, and my iris is a little small, so I'm now enlarging it. And just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and put a reflection there, because if I don't do it now, I'll forget it later and I won't be able to add it in charcoal. Should we get to this degree of detail? Are you ready? Can you handle this? Okay, just a little bit. It might help you to know that most eyeballs, the arch on the top eyelid is not a perfect arch. The highest point of that arch is slightly toward the outside of the eye. Now these are things that you would learn simply by looking at eyeballs. Do you understand? So simply staring at a person's eye and making careful calculations. Then why do I tell you this? Great illustration. The reason is because if you know this is typical, then you'll see it in the eye that you're looking at and you go, oh yeah, that's right. And you'll draw it very quickly, whereas if I hadn't taught you this, that process may take 3, 4, 5 times as long. Does that make sense? So that's why we learn by rote, but you really learn by seeing. So don't let me dissuade you from going out and actually looking at eyes and drawing them. By the way, one of the fun part about drawing eyes is you really can draw your own. That you can get a mirror, put it in front of you, and you remember M.C. Escher? Yeah, drew an entire self-portrait reflected off his eye. So the highest point of that arch is there on the outside, and then likewise, the bottom arch is typically not a perfect arch either. The lowest part is typically slightly toward the inside. Okay, enough detail. Believe me, I'm not going to get any more detailed than that. These rules can go on and on and on and on ad infinitum. Let me go ahead and enlarge the pupil now. So I want to look like this person is relaxed and happy. The position of the fold of the top eyelid is extremely important and extremely varied. It varies from person to person. It varies from race to race. The difference between the Asian eye and the Caucasian eye is not that, as we learned in elementary school, that their eyes are slanted. Their eyes are most certainly not slanted any more than our eyes are slanted. The difference is that the fold, the way their top eyelid folds up into their upper eyelid is different. It folds right here along the bottom crease so that they in effect have a smooth, unbroken plane from their eyebrow down to their eyelid, if you want to know. Okay? Whereas Caucasians have the fold is higher so that we have our upper eyelid folds into something like that. Now, this is certainly not my eye. Let me just to give you a real quick, if this was my eye, I'm not looking at it now, but I've looked at it in the past, it would be something like this. And it's also partly because I'm getting older. I've drawn lots of portraits of old people, and more than once I've had them say, well, would you kind of lift my eyelids up a little bit? Because they don't like the fact that their top eyelid begins to sag down over their bottom top eyelid. But that's about so just be aware of that not all eyes are the same. This looks like probably a young woman's eye to me, model-esque, a beautiful eye. Likewise, there's a lot of variety in the bottom eyelid. It's the crease that occurs. Remember when this was a sheet of elastic rubber and we pushed that sphere forward? Do you remember that? This crease is simply caused by the crimping of that rubber plane, that latex flexible plane. Does that make sense? So again, this is very varied from person to person. With some it'll be very strong, the typical bags under their eyes, and of course as people get older, this gets lower and deeper. For a young person, it's less steep, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. Now, let's do some eyelashes on this eye. Couple things to keep. Eyelashes are a challenge because, of course, they're hair, number one. And hair is always a problem. You want to usually make sure that you don't draw hairs, either when you're doing eyelashes or certainly when you're doing hair on a person's head. You usually don't want to be doing line, 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 line. You want to draw hair as a unit, as a mass. And that is certainly the case with eyelashes. Now, the eyelashes of an eye that's pointing straight at you, most of those eyelashes are pointed at you, so they are not seen very much. But toward the outside and the inside of the eye, they go, can you visualize this? like this eye here, the eyelashes on the inside point this way, so you see the side of the shaft of the hair, so you see more of it. The eyelashes on this side of my eye point that way, you see more of this. Plus, one more thing, the eyelashes toward the outside of the eye are longer than the eyelashes on the rest of the eye. So typically, you recognize this, don't you? I mean, it's the old, the Maybelline or whatever other CoverGirl look, right? There's more eyelash toward the outside than there is on the inside. Now, I need to stop right here and give a very important distinction about the bottom eyelid. This is a mistake I made for years as a young artist, and when I finally discovered it, I thought, how dumb, how could I miss that all these years? And that is what I call the shelf of the bottom eyelid. Now, in order to illustrate this, it's simplest if I can just take this eyeball and turn it to the side. Are you with me? So I'm going to take this eye and just do a diagram of it from the side. Here is the cornea, the outside of the eye. Here is the top eyelid, and here is the bottom eyelid. Now, in both cases, the eyelash grows right off